afternoon, everyone. We will now resume proceedings in Finance Committee. Please be seated. We were considering the appropriations, or the appropriation NGS 74, preservation of natural environments and places of historic significance, for $620,000 on page 178 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions? Mr. Miller?
He did that already. You got the corrections, Mr. Chairman, that they had suspended from the door.
They assured me that they had.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed that the National Trust is being funded to buy, looks like another 90 acres of land. Does the minister know where that land is to be located? It's right, it is right in the document. Last year they owned 3,150 acres. Like this year, oh, I see. Where you get 2,900 from?
Mr. Chair, the National Trust is not being funded to purchase land. This is a contribution to the operating expenses of the National Trust. The actual amount of the contribution is the same as it was last year, $420,000. The difference, sorry, $470,000. The difference is an amount which is in respect of the initial work on a visitor center for the Blue Iguana Visitor Center at the Collier's Wilderness Reserve in East End. This is under the Trust Blue Iguana Recovery Program. The amount of $150,000 was simply added on. It is a one-time amount. The original intention was to add this to, or rather proceed with a motion through this committee for an amount out of the Environmental Protection Fund. But rather than go the extra step and the added work in connection with that, we simply added the 150 to the 470. So the amount that is in this budget in respect of the operating expenses for the trust is the same as it was last year. This 150, additional 150,000 is simply an amount which is a contribution to the construction of this visitor center, as I noted.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, does the member know, if you look at page 178, you will see that the 2013, the acres of environmental property protected, managed, and supported by the National Trust is 3,150 acres, and their budget for 2014 is 3,240 acres. Can the minister say where the National Trust is likely to get the funds from to buy this land?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I would imagine that the trust is going to utilize contributions and donations they have received and specifically for land acquisition to purchase additional lands. I don't have the specific information in relation to the difference between the 13-14 forecast of 3,150 acres and the 14-15 forecast or budget for 3,240. I don't have the specific information in respect to that. But they do, on an ongoing basis, have or receive donations and seek funding specifically for the purpose of the acquisition of lands which are regarded as having environmental value, conservation value.
Can the minister tell me what part of the National Trust law or the bylaws enables the National Trust to go out and harass people to sell them their land, or at a minimum solicit their land?
Mr. Miller, I'm not sure that really falls within this particular
Mr. Chairman,
appropriation.
only this weekend, and I got Mr. McLean as a witness, I was approached by a landowner because the first thing the National Trust came to him years ago was for him to give him the land. They have been writing him letters ever since. He told them the land was not for sale or to give away, it was for his children. They told him that they wanted the land to preserve it. He said, I got 4 children, I'm preserving it for. The most recent offer is $200 an acre. So don't jump to the conclusion that they're not doing it, because the law doesn't, my argument is the law was never intended for them to do it.
No, my statement wasn't that they're not doing it. My statement is that, is it something that the minister has control over, even if they are doing it? We're only appropriating to them, or hoping to appropriate to them, $620,000. Is the question in relation to the appropriation, or is it something that the National Trust is doing that is outside his control?
Well, if he's a minister responsible, I believe he has a certain accountability to the House and a certain responsibility to make sure that the National Trust is operating within the legislative framework that it was established.
Mr.
If he doesn't have the information,
Mr. Chairman, I have no specific knowledge of the matter which the member from Northside alleges. I have no reports, no complaints of anyone from the National Trust harassing anyone. But in relation to whether they have the power under the terms of the law which created the National Trust, which is effectively a statutory corporation, it obviously has the power to own land. It has provisions in the law to declare land that it owns as inalienable. That is a clear indication that there was some kind of contemplation of the National Trust being able to hold land. Otherwise, they couldn't declare it so.
the point, through you, Mr. Chair, is not whether the National Trust has the legal authority to own property and trust for the people of the country, not for the National Trust. It is whether the law and the legislation intended that they would actively seek to purchase land as opposed to people offering it to the National Trust. Because if so, I would like him to quote the section of the law that allows them to do that.
Mr. Pannon, are you able to answer?
I can't really provide any concrete response, I suppose, that would satisfy the member, except to say that if the National Trust, as a statutory corporation, has the power to own land, implicit in that is its ability to acquire land. There would have to be a specific prohibition or restriction on the power of the trust in the law to say that it could not go out and purchase land. It could only acquire land by donation. There is no such restriction or limitation in the National Trust law.
Thank you, Mr. Pannon.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, can the member say what process the trust goes through to make land inalienable?
Mr. Chair, I have to say that I am not totally familiar with the exact mechanics of the process, so it wouldn't be right for me to try to respond at this point, but I can certainly provide that information to the member. It is certainly, the mechanics of it is certainly set out in the law itself.
Thank you, Mr. Fannin. Mr. Miller?
Well, I guess the follow-up question, because the legislation in section 21, if you would indulge me for just a minute, Mr. Chairman, says, any property acquired by the trust by any means which is eligible for placement on the heritage register under the bylaws of the trust may be declared inalienable by the council. So would the member agree that that does not mean that all land purchased or acquired by the trust is automatically inalienable?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the law in front of me, but certainly, based on my own knowledge, I would say that the member is correct. To my knowledge, the National Trust does own certain land that has not been declared inalienable.
And just to quote 21 section 2, property which has been declared inalienable by the council may be alienated only after a 2/3 vote of the full membership of the trust at a general meeting, and only for the reason that so doing will further the purposes of the trust. Will the member agree that this puts authority in the hands of the membership of the trust to dispose of property if the trust determined that it would further the purposes of the trust, i.e. raise funds for the trust?
Mr. Chair, I would imagine that there, as I said, I don't have the law in front of me, but I would imagine that there are other considerations which may be stated in the law as to when it would be appropriate to exercise that sort of decision. The whole concept of having land declared inalienable is to protect that land in perpetuity for the interests of the people of the country. That's the point of the National Trust. It's a little bit curious or interesting to me that the member is complaining about mechanisms and principles that are in the law, which he's a life member of the National Trust, and he was one of the lawmakers at the time who approved that law. I don't have any other involvement in it other than simply being the minister at this point. I think if the member has a complaint about the trust, then we'll have to discuss that in future, but I've offered to have discussions about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fannin.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the minister for that, reminding the public when the law was passed and announcing that I am a life member. Yes, I am a life member of the trust, and the reasons I'm asking this is because of my concern of what the trust has been allowed by successive governments to morph itself into. And indulge me a minute, the Hansards of this House will bear that at the time this legislation was passed, this section of the law was very much discussed, and it was made clear by the mover of the legislation and by the Attorney General that this was not intended to give the National Trust the green light to go out and solicit and purchase lands to put in a land bank, because the same concerns that I am expressing now were expressed at that time during the debate. And members need to be aware that my concern for my constituency is that currently the National Trust owns between 25 and 30% of all arable and usable land in my constituency. And my concern is for the next 2 or 3 generations, because the people ain't gonna have no way to plant yam or cassava. They ain't gonna have no way to be able to cut a top to make a basket. They're not gonna be able to cut a piece of mahogany off one of them trees to make a piece of furniture, because the law specifically makes it an offense. They won't be able to get mangoes off the tree, because the law makes it a specific offense to remove anything from National Trust property. And therein lies my concern. And the other thing I want to publicly announce, and I hope the TV is on, listen to me careful, outsiders. If they come to you all to buy your land, minimum price, $100,000 an acre. House lots on Frank Sound Road are $50,000 and $60,000 for a third of an acre. If the National Trust, people donating the money, they have plenty of money. If they come to buy your land, you want a minimum of $100,000 an acre, not $200 an acre. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. If there are no further questions, Mr. McLean, you have a question, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the minister, in explaining the reason for $150,000 increase in this vote, said it was to assist with building the Iguana Reserve Information Visitor Center. Yes, that's correct. Mr. Chairman, can the minister then tell us what happened with the money from the EU, some fund it was? Help me with it, the doctor there. It was some 4 or 5 million pounds, 3 million pounds or something like that. Can the minister tell us? Because as I recall it, that was earmarked for the same purpose.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have the specifics of the information which the members is seeking. I'm not completely familiar with what he's referring to, but I do know in general that there have been grants made by some EU organization. I can't remember the specifics at this point, but certain grants have been made in support of the Blue Iguana Recovery Project, and some of the funding from that is being used to build the infrastructure around the Blue Iguana Visitor Center. So I think in total, the cost of the Visitor Center is somewhere around $300,000, and part of the funding will be utilized in relation to that and in relation to the supporting infrastructure, building a road in that area, perhaps walking trails, that sort of stuff. But I can provide the member with the information, I just don't have it to hand immediately. And I just don't want to speak out of turn without having the accurate information, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Minister Pannon.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McLean?
I guess I can have leave that one alone now since no knowledge again of it, but that's okay. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if we note that in the AP&E there is the forecast for the acreage of environmental property protected, managed, and supported by the National Trust in 2013-14 is forecast to be 3150, and this year is forecast to be 3240, which is where the member from Northside got his 90 acres, an increase by 90 acres. And then when we look in the purchase agreement, you just stop to allow us to do that. It says 2,900 for the forecast and 3,150 for this coming year, which is 250. Am I right? I'm seeing, I got dyslexia again.
Mr. Chairman, we're not at this point certain which of these numbers are correct, unfortunately. But these are details which are supplied by the National Trust. Yes. We will commit to getting the accurate acreage quantities noted in the output and provide those to members.
Mr. Bush, you have a question, followed by Mr. Miller.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, can the minister say how much properties have been donated to the National Trust recently?
Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't have that information to hand. That would have to be obtained and provided if the member wishes.
Yes, with a value since 2000, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if you want to go back beyond that, but whatever information you get, I'll take once it's correct. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know how much since 2000 was given, granted, whatever, to the National Trust and the value of those properties.
Mr. Chairman, just by way of clarification, so that we understand exactly what we're being asked, the member is seeking the acreage of land that has been donated or contributed to the National
Mitigation
Trust
and
since 2000,
yeah.
and he wants...
Granted, just so, sorry, Minister, but just so that he understands that properties given, properties purchased, and whether granted outright as a gift or in mitigation of something that they did and somebody granted them certain properties in mitigation. So those are the three categories: acreage and value.
Okay.
So-
Mr. Chair, through you, just again, I just want to be absolutely sure that I understand, because the first statement or the first request was property donated. The second clarification added purchase. So are we talking about all land that has been acquired by the National Trust, whether it's by way of donation, whether it's by way of purchase, however received, in other words, and current values?
Yes, since 2000.
Right, but current values or values at the time?
No, I don't know if you want to go to give values at the
I'm
time
asking-
and values now, but I mean, whatever information you give, it'd be good once you have a value to it. Current value.
Well, I will see what information is available, Mr. Chair. I can't commit that we can provide current values, because that may be a very expensive and time-consuming exercise to go through a valuation process.
And let me be clear, I'm not saying they must go do a valuation. If they have a value, certainly if they did something in mitigation, it shows some sort of value in mitigation. And certainly if they was granted outright grant, somebody probably put a value to it and saying, you know, this is 200 acres valued at $200.
Thank you, Mr.
Understood,
Bush. Mr. McLean, you had a follow-up question, sir. No, sorry, Mr. Miller. Sorry, I'm looking at Mr. Miller and saying Mr. McLean.
On a different matter, the National Trust bylaws 1998 revision, section 7, there shall be district committees for each of the following 7 districts: West Bay, Georgetown, Bordentown, Northside, East End, Cayman Brac, and Little Cayman. Can the member state how many district committees exist today?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I would not have that information to hand at this point. I would have to obtain that and provide the member with it.
Would the member agree that if there is no district committees, the National Trust is operating ultra-virus of the bylaws. I can tell you there's no committee in Northside, for instance.
Mr. Chair, through you, that may be, the member may be correct. I don't know what the consequences of that might be.
I'm not asking for consequences, Mr. Chairman. The bylaws clearly states there shall be. There's none of may, would, or possible, or prefer, right? Does the member agree that if there is not a district committee in one of these 7 districts, that the National Trust is not following the law?
Mr. Chair, through you, if that is what the provision says, as the member has read, then I would say he is correct.
You won't read it yourself? You don't believe me? Well,
Mr. McLean, Mr. Miller. You can believe by tomorrow morning they can have committees. Sorry.
You get me for that by tomorrow morning.
can the member say if when the National Trust purchases land and declares it inalienable, whether that prohibits them granting easements over the property to surrounding land owners?
Mr. Chair, I would not know whether that is a relevant restriction on the question of making the land inalienable. It may be, I don't know. I'd have to check that.
Mr. Chairman, there is at least one instance in my constituency where the National Trust has refused, although 2 other landowners agreed for an easement for a tourism development. The National Trust refused to give an easement over a very short distance. I don't remember the exact dimensions now. And basically held up that development for several years until the person went and bought land and almost got to go around his elbow, get to his chin, instead of going the direct route. Because, Mr. Chairman, the reason I'm trying to get the question answered is because this is part of how they drive the value down of people's land that they're trying to purchase by telling them they have no right of way to the property.
If Mr. McLean, Mr. Miller, I'm not sure if there was a question in there, so if there isn't a question,
I would say, Mr. Chair, that whether it's declared inalienable or not, the National Trust as a legal entity created by statute has the right of ownership and all of the rights that go with that, and the same as anybody else could. So land that Mr. Miller could refuse an easement over, I suppose they could equally do so.
thank you. Mr. McLean, Mr. Miller, you had another question? Okay.
It's a question, Mr. Chairman, but they can't answer them, so I won't waste the time with the committee.
Okay. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to the vote. All those in favor of NGS 74, preservation of natural environments and places of historic significance, for $620,000, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Turning now to transfer payments. TP 63, support to local business associations, $100,000 on page 287. Are there any questions? Mr. Miller?
Could we have some explanation for this and how one qualifies to get this support? Is this something that is being managed through the Department of Commerce, or what it's called? And is this for small businesses, or what is it intended to help?
Mr. Chair, this heading is in respect of the contribution to Cayman Finance to support joint promotion and marketing efforts between the Ministry and Cayman Finance of the financial industry.
Are there, Mr. McLean, you have a question, sir?
Mr. Chairman, is the minister telling us that we are jointly doing this, or is this just a contribution to the?
Mr. Chair, this is the 1 second. Sorry, Mr. Chair. This is a joint marketing program which the Ministry and Cayman Finance have embarked on through the ambit of the Memorandum of Understanding which the Ministry has with Cayman Finance, as I said, for the promotion of the financial industry services.
Mr. Chairman, pardon me? Mr. Chairman, has this government considered, or the minister, have we considered doing a joint finance in a joint, this as a joint venture, period, Cayman Finance and the government, and probably restructure that so we get more people in there so that we can get more done in, as opposed to the advisory committee that we always have, and make it be a half financed by the financial industry and half financed by government. If we consider the financial industry so important to us, and it is,
Mr. McLean, you had completed your question, sir?
yes.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could ask the member to restate the question so that there's absolute clarity.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Cayman Finance is out there trying to promote and bring business to Cayman and look at all the business that is going on around the world and catch them real quick and look at them, see if they can advise government, that kind of stuff. I'm asking, has government considered talking to the members of the financial community that runs this Cayman Finance? They come from the lawyers, the what have you, and government go jointly with them, reform this thing in order that we can be a little more proactive, so to speak, on the global front when these things are happening. Because the minister ain't got no time for that. The minister, you know, they could have analysts in there and that kind of stuff. And government, it is important to us.
Mr. Chair, I thank the member for the question. In fact, what the member is describing and has articulated is essentially the approach that we have taken with Cayman Finance in the last year. That's one of the reasons we entered into the new Memorandum of Understanding with them. We wanted an association which was going to be representative of the broader industry. So we encouraged, and it has resulted in a much broader membership base for Cayman Finance. the operating cost for Cayman Finance is considerably more than this 100,000. It is covered by dues that are levied on the members. I think they have graduated membership scales now. It goes, I don't remember what it starts at, but it goes up to somewhere in the region of 100,000. So you have a number of members who are contributing these dues, number of private sector members who are contributing these dues. So what we're talking about here in relation to this 100,000 is essentially a sharing, a 50% sharing of the cost of this joint marketing and promotion initiative. There's lots of other stuff which Cayman Finance is doing, which feeds into this and supports it, but those costs are being covered by the rest of the private sector membership. So what government is contributing here is essentially only a very small fraction of the operating costs of and expenditures for Cayman Finance. If you compare that to other jurisdictions, Mr. Chairman, some of our competitor jurisdictions, we are contributing essentially 100,000 in this respect. There are other jurisdictions in which the government is contributing millions for the promotion and development of that industry.
Mr. Chairman, I really don't know if he should have said the last part of it. What he said, because that's where I'm driving to. Why can't we have a 50% stake in the development of the financial industry? That's precisely what I'm talking about. Other countries put millions of dollars at it and equal with the financial industry, and that's precisely what I'm saying. You know, these guys can jointly can hire analysts and the likes and drafts people to draft the laws, and so that they come to the minister then every Monday morning or something. The minister has a report on what has been going on in the world from this thing. That's what I'm looking at. If we're going to consider the financial services, our GDP almost, then we need to put some emphasis on it. And these guys have gone out there and started it, and I believe that we need to go 50-50 with them.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I wholly appreciate the member's comments. I wholly support and agree with them. The member may recall that I really tried to raise the consciousness of the House and the public on the issue of supporting the financial services industry. So I'm there with his perspective completely. However, we have had budgetary constraints, and we're doing what we can within those constraints at this point. Perhaps we will move down the road. I mean, we've increased it from about 65,000 last year to 100,000 this year. So perhaps it's baby steps, but we're moving in the direction of providing more support and engaging more with industry in the promotion and development of the financial services industry.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the minister and whatever his efforts may be and whatever he's trying to do. Now, we just recently talked in Finance Committee about the directorship fees earmarked towards SEMA's operation. Well, it is time now that we find some way to finance a joint operation committee, or what do you want to call it, with Cayman Finance. And if you want to change the name, please feel free to do it. You want to leave the name the way it is. But we need to find some way to generate that revenue that is earmarked specifically so that we can have specialists, experts sitting there and watching the world's financial industry, see what is coming up, inform the minister of it, inform cabinet of it, and it is a small price to pay for us to stay on the cutting edge.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Pannon?
Mr. Chairman, as I said before, I am completely on all fours with the member's comments. I support that. I support his perspective completely. I am happy, perhaps I should say I'm glad to see he supports my perspective, but let's just say I support his perspective on this. That is the direction we're moving. Now, clearly there's a long ways to go before we're in the position and free of any budgetary constraints in order to engage in that sort of thing. But historically, what has happened in the industry here is private sector has been one of the driving forces behind the promotion and development of the industry in terms of going out and doing the marketing and business development, in terms of promoting industry, in terms of funding a lot of the services that are provided through the significant fees that have been imposed on them over, let's say, certainly over the last several years. So they have, the Cayman Finance has strategy committees, and they have marketing committees. They have specific disciplines, as I mentioned. On another occasion, they have specific disciplines and subcommittees dealing with various different areas which provide advice, which provide support, and who assist in reviewing and assist in the consultation process, whether it's domestic legislation or whether it's external or international or supranational issues that the country is confronted with. So there's a tremendous amount of engagement, and I certainly welcome and thank them for that. We are simply, this particular item reflects a step in the right direction towards improving our relationship and allowing government to become a bigger partner in that process.
Well, I thank the Minister, Mr. Chairman, but he spoke about me supporting his initiative. Maybe nobody knows, but I proposed that same thing long before you came here. But it didn't gain any traction, so to speak, because successive governments got too much jealousies in them, because all they talk about, them guys, all they want to do make money, and they're not going in no agreement with them. We need to stop that selfishness on the part of successive governments. That's why my proposal didn't gain any traction.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to the vote. All those in favor of TP 63, support to local business associations, $100,000, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Other executive expenses, OE 66, United Nations Caribbean Environmental Program for $8,000 on page 290. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, then all those in favor of OE 66, United Nations Caribbean Environmental Program for $8,000, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Equity investments, I'll consider both of those together. EI 4, Cayman Islands Development Bank. EI 67, Ministry of Financial Services, Commerce and Environment. EI 4 being $1,500,000. EI 67, $1,751,453. Are there any questions with respect to these appropriations?
Mr. Chairman, I just want 67, I think it is. If you would, I see we have, it is 1, 3, 5 times the amount, or thereabouts, 4 times the amount this year. And I wonder what kind of assets we're getting here.
Mr. Pannon?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank the member for the question. Certainly a very good question. The amount is $1,751,453. That is comprised of approximately $1,500,000 in relation to the software package to deal with registrations and filings and automatic reporting under FATCA. So that is the expected cost of acquisition of the software platform to deal with those automatic exchange of information reporting requirements under FATCA. The balance is an aggregate amount for the Department of Environment. I can give a breakdown of that if members wish. It's on page 289. Just hold on.
Of the annual budget statement, Mr.
Sorry,
McLean.
page 289 of the annual budget statement.
statement.
Thank you, sir. $289 of the annual budget statements.
We tried to give it to you on iPad, sir, but you wanted it in hard copy.
Mr. Chairman, thank God you come in here with new technology, but remember, parliaments were built on paper. More trees you have cut down. Someone develop good stuff for it. So, Mr. Chairman, can the minister tell us where this FATCA reporting software will be housed, held? Who is going to manage this?
Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for the question. That platform is going to be maintained through the Department for International Tax Corporation. What we currently know as the Tax Information Authority.
And where is that? Pray tell.
So, Mr. Chair, the office for that is located in Elizabethan Square at this point. The intention is to move that office into the new government administration building, and there are ongoing discussions in terms of the logistics of accomplishing that through the what's it called? Facilities management and the relevant ministry.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the minister, this 1.5 million, is that a one-off fee, or we have to pay?
That is a one-off acquisition fee, sir.
And
That is what we anticipate. It's entirely possible it might be less than that. We have there, because this is not a new, this is a new platform. This is not something that exists. It's being developed by different joint venture groups who are versed in doing a lot of these volume filings electronically. This is something that we can't put a specific number to at this point. It doesn't have a specific price tag, but it is within this range that we are anticipating it will cost.
You mean it's our contribution, or we buying
This is the capital cost of acquiring the software for this purpose. It is a one-off.
And who developed
one-off
the
cost.
Who developed this software?
It is being tendered. There are various different service providers that are collaborating to create these platforms.
I see Roy grabbing Mike up and they make him speak.
Mr. Mark Taggart.
Well, I can share because I do know that the tender is about to go public in early July, sir. I know that there are a limited number of service providers who have developed a platform that are being marketed, and these are the people that will obviously likely be tendering for the project to implement this platform for the country going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mark Taggart. Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Minister, is the industry going to make any contribution to this investment in the software?
Mr. Chair, there is no proposal to have industry sharing any aspect of this cost specifically.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Chairman, can the minister tell us what does the Department of Environment have to do with cat traps? Cat traps, the thing you catch cat in.
Mr. Chair, the item the members are referring to for cat traps is in respect of attempts to control feral cats in the sister islands in particular, who are killing the young iguanas, the rock iguanas in the sister islands. Apparently there's a very significant problem with feral cats, and this program is designed to capture them to help alleviate that problem.
Mr. Pannon, is there any proposal to introduce those cats to the Grand Cayman? They would help. Because we have the iguana problem in Grand Cayman.
If we could keep them out of the eastern districts where the blue iguanas exist, perhaps that's a solution. But no, on a serious question, I don't know what the plan is, but certainly the feral cats are not going to be released into the wild in Cayman.
No, but the truth is, does the Department of Environment have any plan to deal with the green iguana in Grand Cayman?
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any specific program. I think the size of the infestation problem is of such a magnitude at this point that it would be very difficult to effectively do much about it.
Mr. Chairman, we thought that about the rabbits years ago too. And you know what we did for them. And we made that proposal here already. Put a bound out on the head. Give the farmers shots, just like what you do in Cayman Brack for the feral cats. Because you got to catch them in Cayman Brack, we got to release them. Must be in the middle of the ocean, you bring them east end. Understand that? So we need to know what are we going to do with these cats in Cayman Brack when you catch them. We got to euthanize them. It's just as cheap give shotgun bullets to them farmers come on back and put bound out on the head. Or you're taking them little Cayman. Okay, good. That's enough.
Mr. Chair, the question I was responding to earlier was whether the problem was mainly in Cayman Brack or Little Cayman, and I was simply saying the problem with the feral cats is mainly in Little Cayman, not to suggest to the member from East End that the cats were going to be moved to Little Cayman. The problem exists there, and that's what we're trying to deal with there.
So may I then ask, Mr. Chairman, what will be the results of trapping the cats? Where are we going to put them? What are we going to do with them? euthanize them?
Mr. Chair, I would imagine that is one of the likely end results for these cats, unfortunately.
What a process. Get shotguns. Give them to the farmers. You're killing them anyway, so don't say it cruel.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to the vote. So all those in favor of EI4, Cayman Islands Development Bank, $1,500,000, and EI67, Ministry of Financial Services, Commerce and Environment for $1,751,453, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Thank you. Minister Pannon, that brings us to the end of your appropriation, sir, and I want to thank you and your staff very much for your time and patience and all that you've provided us with, all the information you've provided.
Mr. Chair, if you would indulge me another few seconds, I would like to also thank you for your guidance. Thank the members of this honorable committee for the questions and the interest. Specifically, I'd like to thank the department members, the ministry members, Department of Commerce and Environment, the Department of Department of Commerce and Investment, Department of Environment, Cayman Islands Development Bank, Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, and the Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands in terms of their attendance, the managing directors, the senior people, the time they've committed. So I appreciate and thank all of them for their service. Thank you again, sir.
Mr. Chairman, just to,
Yes,
to
sir.
remind the minister, and the commitments and those values on the properties at the.
Mr. Chair, a note has been made of all the commitments made.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to consider the appropriations to the Minister for District Administration, Tourism and Transport. But before we do so, I just want to point out that there will be a change in the order of appearance as stated in the handout that was given to members. You will see there that at number 8, which would normally follow the Ministry of District Admin and Tourism, the Ministry of Education, listed at number 8, would normally follow right after. However, we recognize that the Minister for Education does have significant responsibilities this week, considering the number of school graduations that are taking place. So we would move the Ministry of Education, Employment and Gender Affairs to Monday morning, given that she also has to travel to the BRAC for high school graduation this Saturday. The program's taking place this Saturday, to the best of my understanding. So she'll be leaving on Friday evening. So we will now consider the appropriations to the Minister of We will suspend proceedings for approximately 5 to 10 minutes to give the district administration tourism and transport staff time to settle in and prepare for them, prepare themselves for the questions. Thank you.